After school one cold, drizzling afternoon, Chiamaka returned home, eager to share her day with her mother, but found out that only Mr. Nna was around. Her mother had gone to the market, trusting her daughter would be safe when she returned from school. Mr. Nna, seeing Chiamaka alone, lured her with false friendliness. He called her into his room, his voice dripping with deceit. "I need your help with something," he said, his eyes gleaming with wicked intent. Chiamaka's innocence made her trust him. She didn't notice the evil lurking beneath his smile. As she entered the room, the encounter quickly turned sinister, and Mr. Nna shattered her innocence, leaving her devastated and forever changed. Nkechi was a devoted wife and mother, a woman of quiet strength and dignity, whose world revolved around her family. Her husband had always been her rock, a kind-hearted man who worked tirelessly to build a small business and provide for their family. They dreamed of sending their 14-year-old daughter, Chiamaka, to school so she could live a life filled with opportunities. But their lives took a tragic turn when her husband fell ill unexpectedly and passed away. Grieving and vulnerable, Nkechi believed she could lean on her husband's family for support, but she couldn't have foreseen the cruel twist her life was about to take. Her husband's family arrived soon after his death like a storm, their faces edged with disdain rather than grief. They came not to comfort Nkechi, but to accuse her of being responsible for their brother's death. They took her to the village. Nkechi, though devastated, agreed to perform the grueling widow's rites demanded by their custom, enduring humiliations to prove her innocence. After her husband's burial, she stayed back to mourn him for some months, adhering to every tradition with unwavering dignity. And when she was done, she returned to the city with her daughter, only to meet the shock of her life. Sitting in her living room was her husband's elder brother, his demeanor cold and unyielding. Empty bottles littered the table beside him, a testament to his confidence in his authority. She greeted him calmly, though she was surprised to see him. Before she could ask further questions, he interrupted her sharply. "I hope you are ready to do what the elders have decided," he said, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I cannot marry you," Nkechi replied calmly, her resolve firm. His reaction was swift and brutal. "Then get out, both of you. This house and everything your husband left behind is mine now." "But uncle, this is my father's house," Chiamaka whispered, her voice trembling with fear. "Not anymore," he sneered. "Your mother refuses to cooperate, so you have no place here," he replied her harshly. "What about my daughter?" Nkechi's voice cracked with desperation as tears streamed down her face. "I worked alongside my husband to build this home. You can't just take everything," she asked him calmly. "She's a girl his part. She does not count. No female child is entitled to inheritance," he declared coldly, and pushed them out without any show of compassion. He took her husband's modest business, their humble home, and every last possession. Nkechi pleaded, but his words were final. Heartbroken and furious, Nkechi held her daughter close, determined to survive, even if the world has turned its back on them. With nowhere else to go, Nkechi wandered the streets with Chiamaka, clinging to the fragment of her dignity as she looked for a roof to shelter them. They tried knocking on friends' doors, asking them for temporal shelter, but no one would take them in. Rejected and alone, Nkechi finally found an unfinished building on the outskirts of the city. The inside was cold, damp and dark, It was far from the safe home they once knew, but it was all they had. Each night they huddled together on the concrete floor, trying to keep each other warm, with nothing but their shared grief and hope for a better day. As days goes by, Nkechi realized she needed to find work, so she went to the busy city market. There she offered to carry loads and help shoppers transport their goods to their cars. It was an exhausting work and the pay was little, but it was enough to buy food for her and her daughter. Chiamaka, despite her age, insisted on helping. She carried smaller bags and helped her mother with a resilience and determination that broke Nkechi's heart. Day by day they struggled, working together to survive in a world that seemed to have forgotten them. But as fate would have it, one sweltering afternoon, Nkechi and Chiamaka helped a wealthy woman named Mrs. Chinyere, who was carrying numerous bags filled with expensive goods. Mrs. Chinyere noticed their exhausted faces and the shabby clothes they wore. Something about their quiet dignity touched her, and she asked Nkechi about their lives. With hesitation, Nkechi poured out their story, sharing the loss of her husband and the injustice they had faced. Mrs. Chinyere listened, shocked and saddened by what they had been through, and her kindness shone like a beacon. She offered Nkechi a job at her mansion, promising that Chiamaka could go back to school. Nkechi's heart swelled with gratitude as she accepted the offer immediately, seeing a spark of hope for the first time in months. As they moved into the mansion was like stepping into another world. The grand polished floors, the beautiful furnishings, and the comfort of a warm, soft bed seemed unreal to them. Mrs. Chinyere assigned them a small but cozy room, and Chiamaka could hardly believe she would have her own bed again. Nkechi felt a surge of relief and joy. At last, they had found safety and stability, and Chiamaka would finally be able to attend school, as they had always dreamed of. Little did they know their newfound hope would soon turn into a nightmare. Nkechi soon met Mrs. Chinyere's husband, named Mr. Nna. He was a well-dressed, successful businessman with a smooth charm and a powerful presence. The wealthy couple's kindness seemed too good to be true. Mrs. Chinyere was warm and nurturing. She ensured Chiamaka had everything she needed. Nkechi's heart swelled with gratitude. Maybe, just maybe, their luck had changed. But Nkechi noticed, however, that behind Mr. Nna's warm smile, there was an unnerving coldness in his eyes. He hardly acknowledged them in the presence of his wife, treating them more like invisible staff than people. But when his wife was not around, his eyes would linger on Chiamaka, and Nkechi dismissed it as mere kindness, grateful for the opportunity they had been given, and ignored her discomfort around him. Life in the mansion began to feel like a blessing. Each day, Chiamaka would go to school, excited about her studies and eager to learn more. Nkechi worked hard in the house, cooking and organizing, making sure to keep everything running smoothly for Mrs. Chinyere. And Mrs. Chinyere appreciated her effort with kindness. One fateful day, Mrs. Chinyere announced she had to travel on a long business trip abroad. She left instructions and even gave Nkechi some extra money to buy food for the house, expressing her full trust in Nkechi's capabilities. Nkechi assured her that everything would be fine, feeling confident and responsible. She never suspected that this trip would mark the beginning of a nightmare. After school one cold, drizzling afternoon, Chiamaka returned home, eager to share her day with her mother, but found out that only Mr. Nna was around. Her mother had gone to the market, trusting her daughter would be safe when she returned from school. Mr. Nna, seeing Chiamaka alone, lured her with false friendliness. He called her into his room, his voice dripping with deceit. "I need your help with something," he said, his eyes gleaming with wicked intent. Chiamaka's innocence made her trust him. She didn't notice the evil lurking beneath his smile. As she entered the room, the encounter quickly turned sinister, and Mr. Nna shattered her innocence, leaving her devastated and forever changed. Chiamaka became traumatized and terrified, too shocked to comprehend what has happened. When Nkechi returned, she found her daughter in their room, coiled up in silent anguish. With a mother's intuition, she sensed something was terribly wrong. Chiamaka's tears and trembling body told a horrifying story. "What happened?" Nkechi demanded, her heart racing. But Chiamaka was too shocked and traumatized to say a word. Gently, Nkechi coaxed the truth from her daughter. And as Chiamaka managed to whisper her ordeal, Nkechi's world collapsed. Grief, anger, and helplessness filled her heart. She wanted to protect her daughter, to make things right, but when she confronted Mr. Nna, he cruelly dismissed the accusations and threatened to ruin them if they told anyone. Nkechi's anger boiled over, but Mr. Nna's menacing gaze froze her. "You will say nothing," he snarled. "If you speak, I will jail you and your daughter. You are nothing but poor, desperate women. No one will believe you," he said. Nkechi knew he was right. Who would listen to them? The wealthy and powerful Mr. Nna would silence them. The next morning, in the mansion's spacious but cold foyer, Mr. Nna stood at the top of the staircase and publicly accused Nkechi of trying to steal from the house. He ordered her and Chiamaka to leave immediately, spreading lies to tarnish their reputation. Other household staff watched in silence, too scared to speak. Nkechi and Chiamaka, humiliated and heartbroken, with tears streaming down their faces, left the mansion with nothing but their bags and the nightmare of Mr. Nna's cruelty, returning to the uncompleted building. The same darkness that has once consumed them now seemed even more suffocating. Back in the abandoned building, Nkechi and Chiamaka struggled to cope with the betrayal and the trauma they had endured. Chiamaka, once bright and hopeful, became quiet, withdrawn and haunted by nightmares. Nkechi felt helpless, but she held her daughter close, promising they would find a way to survive. She tried to reassure Chiamaka, though her own heart was breaking. Back in the mansion, Mrs. Chinyere returned, unaware of the horror that has unfolded. As she asked about Nkechi and Chiamaka, Mr. Nna lied to her. "Nkechi tried to steal my golden wristwatch. I had to send them away," he said to his wife. Mrs. Chinyere was shocked, but had no choice than to believe her husband. As the weeks passed, Nkechi noticed Chiamaka's health deteriorating. She was constantly fatigued, her appetite dwindled, and she showed signs of sickness. Slowly, the realization dawned on her. Chiamaka was pregnant. The weight of this new reality overwhelmed her, but she steeled herself. She knew they could not confront Mr. Nna, but she was determined not to let this defeat them. They would survive, for Chiamaka and for the child she carried. Chiamaka's pregnancy weighed heavily on Nkechi, and they had no one to turn to. She had started frying bean cake, yam and potatoes at a busy junction with her savings from the mansion, and the business was progressing. She worked until exhausted, doing whatever she could to earn enough to care for her daughter and the unborn child. Despite the pain and struggle, her love for Chiamaka and her future grandchild gave her strength. She hid Chiamaka's condition from the world, fearing judgment and shame. But as Chiamaka's belly grew, secrecy became impossible. One day, Chiamaka's school principal summoned Nkechi. Chiamaka's grades have suffered. What's troubling her? The principal asked. Nkechi hesitated, unsure how much to reveal, but the principal's kind eyes put her at ease. She's been through something terrible, Nkechi whispered. A man took advantage of her. He's powerful, and we are alone and helpless. The principal's expression turned stern. We will support Chiamaka, but we need to report this, he declared. Nkechi's fear spiked. No, please, he will ruin us, she said. The principal understood better and promised to support Nkechi to give her daughter a newfound strength. Chiamaka continued school, hiding her pregnancy from her classmates. After months of hardship, Chiamaka gave birth to a baby boy. Nkechi held him, tears streaming down her face. Amid struggle, hope emerged. They named him Chisom, meaning God is with me, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was still hope. For Nkechi and Chiamaka, Chisom became a source of strength, a symbol of resilience against all odds. As Chisom grew, Chiamaka began to regain her strength, though the trauma had left deep scars. Her love for her son and her mother's unwavering support rekindled her spirit. She decided to pursue her education, determined to one day bring justice to those who had wronged her and her family. With Nkechi's savings, Chiamaka returned to school. Balancing motherhood and studies was challenging, but she was driven by a newfound purpose. She worked tirelessly, often studying late into the night, fueled by the dream of becoming a lawyer and ensuring no one else suffered as she had. Chiamaka called her mother one day and said, I want to study law, Mom, and make sure men like Mr. Nna face justice. Nkechi beamed with pride. You will change the world, my daughter, her mother replied. Her heart swelled with pride as she watches her daughter turn her pain into strength, forging a path of justice. Chiamaka's hard work paid off, and she graduated with honors and a scholarship to a prestigious university. In the university, Chiamaka studied law with a singular focus. She delved into human rights and justice, determined to understand the law inside out. Each lesson strengthened her resolve to confront Mr. Nna, to fight for the truth, and to make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. She met like-minded individuals who shared her passion for justice. Together they formed a support group for survivors of abuse. Chiamaka's confidence soared. She began to speak out against injustice, inspiring others to do the same. One day, Chiamaka approached her mother with a resolute look. Mother, it's time, she said. I'm ready to face Mr. Nna. Nkechi, proud of her daughter's courage, supported her gladly. As a young lawyer, Chiamaka began gathering the pieces of evidence she needed to confront Mr. Nna. She tracked down former employees, anyone who could corroborate her and her mother's story. She also searched for records that might link Mr. Nna to his previous wrongdoings. And the principal who had helped her during her pregnancy also provided witnesses and documents, strengthening Chiamaka's case. Slowly she built her case, piece by piece. With enough evidence in hand, Chiamaka reached out to legal organizations that supported victims of abuse, sharing her story with them. Many were moved by her journey, and several groups offered to help. They provided resources, connected her with experts, and even offered financial assistance to cover the cost of the trial. And a renowned human rights lawyer named Mrs. Okoro, who was moved by Chiamaka's story, agreed to take on the case pro bono. Chiamaka felt strengthened by the support, knowing she was not alone in this fight. It was time for Chiamaka to finally confront Mr. Nna. She and Mrs. Okoro filed an official complaint, naming him as the father of Chiamaka's child and describing the abuse she had suffered. Chiamaka knew this would shake him, but she was ready. When he received the summons, Mr. Nna was stunned. He had dismissed Chiamaka and her mother as a powerless women he could silence, never imagining they would one day come back to seek justice. The day of the trial arrived. Mr. Nna, with his wealth and influence, hired the best lawyers money could buy. But Chiamaka, armed with her legal knowledge and unbreakable will, with Mrs. Okoro by her side, faced him with confidence. The courtroom was filled with tension as both sides prepared to argue. As she took the witness stand, Chiamaka shared her story in full, her voice steady and her gaze unwavering. Nkechi took the stand next, her hands gripping the edge of the witness box. As she testifies with raw emotion, she talked about the years of hardship, the betrayal, and the suffering Mr. Nna had caused them. She spoke of the pain of watching her daughter's life change in a single day, and the years she had spent working tirelessly to give Chiamaka and her grandson a future. Her words resonated deeply, moving many in the courtroom. As part of her case, Mrs. Okoro submitted a paternity test, which proved that Mr. Nna was indeed the father of Chiamaka's son. With this undeniable proof, Mr. Nna's legal team struggled to counter the evidence. Chiamaka felt a surge of relief, seeing his defenses start to crumble under the weight of the truth, while Mr. Nna's expression turned pale and panicked. Former household staff members took the stand, sharing their own observations of Mr. Nna's behavior. Some testified to witnessing his cold treatment of Nkechi and Chiamaka, while others had heard rumors of the incidents and seen Mr. Nna's threats. Their testimonies added depth to Chiamaka's case, showing that she and her mother had not been alone in their suffering. After days of deliberation, the judge delivered the verdict. Mr. Nna was found guilty, held accountable not only for the assault, but also for the threat and intimidation he had used to silence them. The ruling felt like a long-awaited victory, a moment of closure that Nkechi and Chiamaka had fought so hard to achieve. Mr. Nna's power and influence had finally crumbled, and he was sentenced to prison for his crimes. Nkechi embraced her daughter tightly, tears of relief and joy streaming down their faces. With justice served, Chiamaka and Nkechi began to rebuild their lives with a newfound sense of freedom and peace. The money awarded to them in damages helped them secure a comfortable home, and Chiamaka's career as a lawyer blossomed. She dedicated her work to helping other women and children who had suffered abuse, determined to use her experience to make a difference. Chiamaka's story spread across the community, inspiring countless others to stand up against injustice. She and Nkechi became a symbol of resilience and courage, proving that even in the face of hardship and betrayal, love and justice could prevail. Together they created a legacy built on strength, showing the world that no one should be forced to live in silence. And so Chiamaka, Nkechi, and little Chisom built a life filled with hope and purpose. Their story a testament to the power of truth and the enduring bond between mother and daughter. After Mr. Nna's crimes were exposed and he was sentenced to life imprisonment, his wife Mrs. Chinyere faced a crossroads. She had been a silent observer for years, too afraid to confront the evil that her husband embodied. The revelation of his monstrous deed shattered her world, leaving her in disgrace and isolation. She met Nkechi and Chiamaka and told them how she had looked around the market, hoping to catch a glimpse of them, but all efforts proved abortive. She apologized for her husband's deeds and told them that her daughter abroad also sent her heartfelt apologies and promised to support them with anything whenever the need arises. Nkechi and Chiamaka appreciated her efforts and thanked her for her understanding. While Nkechi and Chiamaka were rebuilding their lives, Mr. Nna, now imprisoned, was grappling with guilt. The once powerful businessman now sat in a cold, stark cell, reflecting on his actions. Every day he was haunted by the faces of Nkechi, Chiamaka, and little Chisom. He began writing letters, pouring out his regrets and pleading for forgiveness. He sent his first letter to Nkechi, apologizing for his monstrous actions. "I was a wicked man," he wrote. "My power blinded me, and I destroyed your lives. I ask for your forgiveness, though I know I do not deserve it." In another letter he addressed Chiamaka. "Chiamaka, I cannot undo what I have done, but I want you to know I am deeply sorry. I know I am the cause of your pain, but I hope you can one day find peace in your heart. I would like to meet my son Chisom, even if it's just once, so I can beg his forgiveness too." At first, Nkechi and Chiamaka were reluctant to respond. The wounds he had caused were still fresh, and his letters stirred a mix of anger and pity within them. However, they agreed to let him meet Chisom when he was old enough to understand the situation. Years later, as Chisom grew into a bright and curious boy, Nkechi and Chiamaka decided it was time to share his story with him. They explained how his existence was a testament to their strength and resilience. Chisom listened, tears welling down his cheeks. He expressed a desire to meet his father, and Nkechi arranged for them to visit the prison. The meeting was emotional. Mr. Nna, now a shadow of his former self, broke down upon seeing his son. "Chisom, I have no right to call myself your father," he said, his voice trembling. "But I hope you can forgive me for the pain I caused your mother and grandmother." Chisom, wise beyond his years, responded with quiet dignity he had inherited from his mother and grandmother. "I forgive you," he said, "but I will never forget the strength of my family." For Mr. Nna, the forgiveness of his son was a glimmer of redemption, while for Nkechi and Chiamaka, it was another step towards healing. As they left the prison, Mr. Nna arranged another meeting with his lawyer and Chisom, and Chiamaka followed him there, and he handed some documents containing part of his properties he had willed to Chisom, while his wife and daughter abroad would take the rest. He continued his jail term, his hope hanging on the air, as he prayed to be released by pardon. Nkechi and Chiamaka continued to thrive. Chiamaka's work as a lawyer brought justice to many others who had suffered in silence. Nkechi, now a successful entrepreneur, opened a foundation for widows and single mothers, offering them the support she had once needed but never received. Chisom, inspired by his family's resilience, excelled in school, determined to honor their sacrifices. Together they proved that no matter how dark the nights, hope and love could light the way forward. Although Chiamaka's work brought her recognition and fulfillment, her heart remained guarded, a result of the trauma she had endured. Nkechi often prayed for her daughter's happiness, knowing that love could heal wounds. Time alone could not. One day, during a human rights seminar, Chiamaka met Emeka, a kind-hearted young man and a fellow lawyer with a passion for justice. His easy smile and gentle demeanor made her feel at ease in a way she hadn't in years. As they worked together on a case advocating for abused children, Emeka's respect and admiration for Chiamaka grew. "You have an incredible strength, Chiamaka," he told her one evening. "Your story inspires me, and it's clear that your son is lucky to have you as a mother." His words warmed Chiamaka's heart, and over time, their shared values and mutual respect blossomed into love. When Emeka proposed to Chiamaka, it was a simple yet heartfelt moment. "Chiamaka," he said, holding her hands, "you have faced unimaginable pain and emerged stronger. I want to be by your side to create a life filled with joy, love, and hope for you and Chisom. Will you marry me?" Tears welled in Chiamaka's eyes as she nodded, whispering yes. Chiamaka told her mother about Emeka's proposal, and Nkechi was happy for her daughter. She gave her consent, and as they prepared to get married, Nkechi told Emeka and Chiamaka that they have to inform her late husband's family, even though they have not been there for her during tough times. Their custom and traditions demanded she do the right thing. Emeka agreed, and they made arrangements to travel to her late husband's village. As they arrived, her in-laws welcomed her cheerfully. She made their intention known and introduced Emeka to them. Upon seeing how successful they have become, they began to apologize for their ill treatment towards her and her daughter years ago. "You have done noble, our wife," one elder said. "We are sorry for everything and for what Ike did to you and your daughter," another one added. Talking about Ike, Nkechi asked, "How is he and where is he now?" The elder sighed, looking at the other elder, who then gave him a signal to go ahead. Ike had been sick with a strange ailment that has defied treatment, he said. He had been in that room for 2 years, bedridden and waiting for when to join his ancestors, the other elder said, pointing at an old building. "What about his wife, Informa?" Nkechi asked. Informa had long left him and returned to her personal home. "You know she couldn't bear a child for him, but we heard she remarried and had a child with her new husband," the elder replied her. Nkechi's late husband's elder brother, Ike, who had thrown her and her daughter out of their home and was enjoying the fruit of another man's labor, suddenly began to suffer from an inexplicable illness. His health deteriorated rapidly, despite his efforts to seek medical attention. Doctors were baffled, unable to pinpoint the cause of his suffering. He had long mismanaged his late brother's business and squandered everything until nothing is left. He sold their household properties and the house he took from them to afford expensive treatment. But even after draining all the resources that did not belong to him, his health showed no signs of improvement. Consumed by guilt and fear, Ike had a revelation. Perhaps his suffering was tied to the injustice he had committed. He thought of looking for Nkechi and Chiamaka to seek for their forgiveness, but had no idea of where he could find them. With no other hope left, he returned to the village for native treatment, but his health kept on deteriorating. Nkechi felt pity for him and asked to see him. As she entered the room, she met the once tall and vibrant man, now frail, broken, and bedridden. "Who is that?" he whispered, as he felt the presence of someone strange. "It's me, Nkechi, your late brother's wife," she replied. "You mean Nkechi, Chiamaka's mom?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Forgive me, Nkechi," he pleaded, tears streaming down his face. "I wronged you and your daughter and took everything that was yours. My greed and arrogance have led me to this. Please find it in your heart to forgive me, so I may find peace," he begged. Nkechi, though deeply hurt, held her composure. Her eyes softened with her daughter by her side. She spoke firmly with grace. Forgiveness is not easy, but I will give it to you, because holding on to hate will only burden me and my family. But know this, you must also make amends for what you have done. Ike thanked her and promised to use the rest of his life to seek redemption. They left for the city, and Emeka prepared to come with his kinsmen for a proper introduction and traditional marriage. Their wedding was a small, intimate ceremony attended by close friends, family, and colleagues. Nkechi's heart swelled with pride as she watched her daughter walk down the aisle, radiant and confident. After the wedding, Chiamaka and Emeka built a home filled with love and laughter. Emeka embraced Chisom as his own son, teaching him values of kindness and resilience. Together, they created a supportive and nurturing environment, ensuring that Chisom grew up with the security and love Chiamaka had always dreamed of providing him. For Nkechi, seeing her daughter find love and happiness was the greatest reward for her years of sacrifice. She often spent time with her grandson and watching Chiamaka flourish in her new life. Nkechi also became a source of strength for women in the community, sharing her story to inspire others to overcome adversity. I survived because of my daughter, Nkechi would often say, and now she's creating a world where no one else has to endure what we did. Chiamaka continued her work as a lawyer, while Emeka supported her unconditionally. Their shared passion for justice often brought them together in the courtroom, where they fought for the voiceless and marginalized. Years later, as Chisom prepared to leave for the university, Chiamaka and Emeka welcomed a new addition to their family, a beautiful baby girl named Amarachi, meaning God's grace. Chiamaka, holding her daughter in her arms, felt a sense of completeness she had never thought possible. Life wasn't perfect, but it was filled with love, purpose, and hope. The scars of the past remained, but they were a testament to the strength that had brought them to this point. As Chiamaka watched her children grow and thrive, and as she continued her fight for justice, she knew she had truly overcome the darkness. With Emeka by her side and Nkechi's unwavering support, she had built a life filled with meaning and joy. And so Chiamaka, Emeka, Nkechi, Chisom, and little Amarachi lived happily ever after, their lives a testament to resilience, love, and enduring power of hope. This ending ties together the threads of struggle, triumph, and healing, while giving Chiamaka and her family the happiness they deserve. I hope you enjoyed this story that has so many moral lessons. Comment what you have learned below. Please support the channel by liking the video, share to your friends and family, and please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more. Thanks and God bless you. See you in the other videos.